Let's talk about real estate investing and the things you need to consider before you enter into that space. Hello, my name is Ola, and on this channel, I provide tips and insights to anyone looking to build wealth through investing and intentional financial planning. Today, we'll be talking about real estate investing. The first thing you need to establish is why you are buying. Are you buying to live in, or are you buying for rental income? If you are buying to live in, then even though you should still buy a property that you expect to appreciate in value, you should also consider your comfort and the fact that you need to be staying in the place that you love. There's basically, I'm saying that there's some sentimental attachment to that decision, or there's a sentimental portion to that decision. But if you're buying for rental income, then you need to consider market trends and be sure that you are investing in the property that the market is going to be willing to pay good rent for. The next thing is location. Location. I cannot shout that enough. If you are buying to live in, then location obviously matters for your comfort and your security and value appreciation. So if you're buying a property to let it out, then the turnover or the demand for rented property in an area matters a whole lot, right? So you have to consider places where people generally rent properties to ensure that your property doesn't stay unoccupied for long periods of time. So you need to, basically, I'm saying that you need to invest or buy property in an area that has a high demand for rental property. The third thing you need to consider is really the cost. Now, when I say cost, not just the cost of the property, but the cost of every other thing that you need to do or pay for in order to get that property, from your legal fees to your brokerage fees, to the taxes, to insurance, everything. You need to factor that in before you decide, I am going to buy this property. You don't need surprises, right? You don't want to get to a point where, okay, say property costs 100K. And then by the time you are done, you have to cough out an additional 20K for things, and you didn't budget for it. So when you are deciding on the cost of a property, get all the information you need about all the costs that are attached to that property and the transfer of ownership to you before you decide, I am going to take this property. The next thing you need to consider is the future costs you would have to incur. From two angles. One, property taxes will be based on the value of the property. So if you are buying a 100K property and you're buying a 1 million property, your taxes are going to be going in line with the pricing, right? From the another angle to consider is the fact that the bigger the house, the higher the maintenance cost. So it's not just about saying, okay, I am single and I'm living in a 6-bedroom mansion with grounds and all that. To keep those grounds looking tidy, you need to get a gardener, there's a lot that goes into that. So even though you might be able to afford the cost or the price of the property and everything that comes with the initial cost, right, of buying the property, you need to ask yourself, am I really keen on spending this much on maintaining the property? Is it really worth my while? Don't go into it blindly and then realize, oh my goodness, this is such a burden. This is taking up so much of my savings or whatever, right? So you have to plan for these things. So after you consider the initial outlay, consider the future expenses you would have to incur on that property. This is particularly important, especially when you have rental income. If you consider the fact that sometimes your property might be vacant and you're still going to be paying those property taxes and stuff like that, then you have to be more intentional and more calculated about the location and the prices you decide to take on from the start. You know that you need a lawyer, right? There's no way you can go through the process of transferring ownership of a property from one person to the other without going through a lawyer. So you need a lawyer in doing the search to establish original ownership, to make sure that your documentation is tidy in terms of transfer of ownership, to ensure that everything is covered, all your bases are covered, so you actually have the right title to the property, right? So a lawyer is not negotiable in a real estate transaction, in a real estate purchase. I did a piece on the beginner investors checklist, and of course, you know that real estate is an investment. Even if you're buying it to live in, it is still an investment, and it might even take up a huge portion of your total investment portfolio. So you have to be very careful when you are going into it. Now, if you're going to be taking a mortgage for this property, right, you have to run your numbers. By running your numbers, you have to be able to say, okay, how much am I taking? What is the value of this property? How much am I going to be taking as a mortgage? How much is going to be my total repayment for this mortgage? Sometimes people don't run the numbers and they don't realize that it might take a 30-year mortgage, and by the end of 30 years, if you bought something for 100K, you probably have paid back the bank 180,000. Like, that's expensive. But people just think, cause okay, it's affordable at this time, they don't look at it over the whole period to make the decision, right? So think about, so when you are getting your mortgage, ask them for a proper schedule from start to finish so you know how much you are actually going to be spending on the property. And sometimes you might not be able to avoid taking a mortgage, but you know, you since you are aware, you're more likely to make attempts to pay down faster than you ordinarily would have, right? So always consider that. Now it now becomes a higher risk when you are buying for rental income. The risk in taking a mortgage to buy a property for rental income is if you are trying to match the earnings, right? Meaning that the rent is going to cover the mortgage repayment. The truth about it is that if the property is unoccupied for months, you are going to have to cough out money from your regular cash flow to pay back that mortgage. So it is actually a risk. So before you go into such a transaction, be sure that you have like a plan B to provide for days when the property is unoccupied. Finally, you have to understand that real estate as an asset class is quite illiquid. What that means is that you might not be able to convert it to cash as quickly as you would your treasury bill or your fixed deposit, right? So in going into a real estate transaction, be sure of your cash flows. Be sure that the cash that you are committing to that project is cash that you can actually leave in the asset for as much as 7 years. Because sometimes if you go in at the wrong time, you might be stuck in a real estate investment for up to 7 years. It actually does happen. Or you might be forced to sell at a distressed value. So be sure that anytime you're going into real estate, you can actually accommodate leaving cash tied down in that property for a long period of time. It is very, very important. As a quick recap, in investing in real estate, right, make sure that you identify why you are investing. Consider the location because it's very, very important. Then get a good lawyer to make sure your documentation is kosher. Run your numbers for your mortgage to know what you're getting into before you sign that document. And finally, remember that real estate is actually liquid. You need to be sure that you can accommodate living money tied down for a long period of time. I trust this was useful. And like I always say, you can't outsource your health and your finances. You have to engage. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section and I will be sure to respond to it either in the comments or as a video. I will see you next week. Bye.